A lot of people don't realize this. Like, it's mind-blowing what we can do that. Like, yeah, we can do it, and we've been doing it for like 50 years. It's old news now. You should see what we can do now.
Today, I have Brad Anderson with me, and it's time we discuss biotech and Brad's career path. Brad, thank you for joining me today.
Hello, hello. Good to meet you.
Likewise. I'm very excited for this. I find the merging of biology and technology really fascinating. I think that the future of those two things merging is just full of all kinds of opportunities. So let's start with biotech. I know that you aren't really involved with biotech anymore, but let's talk about when you were. What was it like working in biotech?
I enjoyed it. It's a bucket of fun. How's that? It's a bucket of fun. And so what makes it a bucket of fun? So when I was working in biotech, I was working for contract research companies that were developing drugs for clinical trials. And so it's a bucket of fun because every day is very different, and you're working with cutting edge technology, which is also a lot of fun. And just I don't know if you don't work in biology is kind of it's a fun, messy thing to work in because things smell and are, kind of gloopy and like you can't control living things in the same way that you can control physical things or chemicals. So yeah, if you're, I don't know, it was exciting. It was exciting. It was an adrenaline rush. It was an adrenaline rush.
You said you primarily worked with the medicine side of things. Was that correct?
Yep, yep.
Okay. So is that like anything in particular? Was it all kinds of different things? Was like cancer research, or what was that part of it like?
All types of different things. I guess the fun thing to say is I worked on a turkey vaccine. That was my first job. That was the first project we worked on. What a turkey vaccine, which is ridiculous. How many people can say that? But most of the time it was like, different cancer therapies and stuff like that. There were some novel treatments for like antibiotic resistant infections. A lot of it was a lot of it was sort of new novel types of cancer therapies and things like that. And the area that I focused on, so there's biologics and there's pharmaceuticals. So pharmaceuticals is what we think of when we think of drugs. They're like the chemical pills that are in a pill form. Biologics, rather than being generated by like a chemical manufacturing process, biologics are manufactured through biological processes. So the way that we would work is we would have a bacteria that would be genetically modified to produce whatever therapeutic substance we needed. The bacteria would produce it, we'd purify that substance out, and voila, that would be the substance that we would have. So yeah, we were looking at a lot of novel treatments through that way. So a lot of it was cancer research, but yeah, we had some other fun little squirrely things as well.
That's so fascinating. I like that. I find this area of science just so interesting. I know like when I read up on different things, they talk about, gene splicing, like cutting and copying genes. Like that just blows
I
my
know.
mind. It's so cool.
And it's a lot of people don't realize this. Like it's mind blowing, but it's like old hat for us now. Like we've been doing that for like decades. Like that's all. Like so like the stuff that kind of like what we can do that. Like yeah, we can do it, and we've been doing it for like 50 years. Like it's old news now. You should see what we can do now. So yeah, I know it's kind of cool. Like one of the products that we worked on, like it was kind of neat because you combine a therapeutic agent with it was actually a toxin, right? So a toxin has two components. It has this component that latches onto our cell and then goes into the cell, and then it has the bomb that blows up and poisons the cell. So it had the toxin. We got rid of the poisonous thing and we put the therapeutic thing on the target. So now it still has this targeting molecule from the toxin, but instead of having the payload, the bomb, it had this therapeutic agent. And so yeah, no, that's old technology. That's for me like back in the 1990s, 1,000 years ago. In the 1990s, we could do stuff like that. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah.
So since you're not doing this anymore, I'm assuming you're probably still following it. At least maybe you're on the peripheral, I'm
Yeah.
assuming.
Yeah, yeah. Keep my eye on it, and it's like, oh, this is what we're doing now. Yeah, yep.
So in layman's terms, what are some of the things that are happening right now? You talk about like the advanced things we're doing right now. What are some of those things?
So I've been out of it since about 2009 now. So I'm probably whatever 15 years out of date, and it looks like that field has exploded in terms of the capabilities that we have there, right? Like DNA sequencing, like when I was active in biotech, DNA sequencing was like a slow, laborious. It was like a thing. It was like it was a thing, slow, laborious. You'd get a grad student to do it, and they'd and now it's so fast. It's so fast. It's so easy. Um, the you know like these mRNA vaccines are like it's like that is a cool thing that they're doing. Like I I'm certainly not the expert to speak about it, but vaccines used to be we'd have the broken down component of a virus that we'd then inject, and then that broken down component would trigger the immune system. And now with these mRNA vaccines, instead of having the broken down component in the virus, it sort of infects the cell and gets the cell to produce that signal itself. So yeah, I know. Which just what that does is it gives us a lot more fine-tuning control over vaccine production than we ever had before, and it has so many other applications. You can start to maybe correct other types of genetic issues and problems, and so on. So I know, just it's pretty cool what we can do. And I say it's cool what we can do, and for whatever reason, and I don't know why, but the field of biology, the field of biotechnology seems to be under promoted. Like the advances in computers sort of dominates all the news, and then meanwhile in the background we're like there's all like um, you don't, again, this is like 50-year-old technology, but biologists have made mice that glow in the dark. They've, right? And that's like old news. Like that was when I was in undergrad in the 80s, that was like 10 years old, right? And all this stuff's going on in the background. And like people don't know that we can have all this amazing capability. But somehow we do. So I don't know. It's pretty groovy.
So it is. It's so fascinating.
Yeah.
Just the other day I was reading about Neuralink got FDA approval as a tool to work with blind people, help see essentially. So it's going to go to trials in humans, I believe. It's
Yeah, right.
but like stuff like that, just so fascinating. So
Yeah.
let me ask you this. When you were working on different things, like the turkey vaccine, for instance,
Yeah. Yeah.
by the time that stuff went, because I'm assuming some of the stuff you went on went to market, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
What was that like by the time that happens? I was like, oh yeah, no big deal. Or was it like still very exciting for you?
It is always exciting when you get the win. And the companies that I work for were always contract research companies, so there never are stuff. Like they're all, we were hired guns for other people. But it's nice to work. It's nice to work with a winner. It's nice to see the impact you have. That was something even back, so when I first started in the early 90s, we were working on, let's say, cancer therapeutics, right? And we get letters, even though it's still in the stage 1 clinical trials at that time, stage 1, stage 2 clinical trials at that time. We get letters from people just sort of saying the impact that it had on their life, even though it wasn't even commercially available. Like just like sort of those impact statements, like wow, is pretty motivating, right? You're like, oh, I'm actually doing something meaningful that impacts somebody else's life. Sometimes it's easy to lose sight of that when you're just in the lab and lights are blinking at you. But to see what happens at the end of the trail is really gratifying.
I can only imagine. Now let's talk about the
Yeah.
opposite end of that. What happens? What are some of the pain points of
Oh,
working in biotech? Like you
so
specifically,
many,
like on a typical day, what were some of the things that are like, oh, I can't believe this is
so many.
happening? Or
All right, pain points. I started off saying it was an adrenaline rush because I worked in the contract manufacturing industry, and that's where it was really an adrenaline rush because that job that I had, what we did is we worked specifically with people who had like a very early stage. Basically, they'd developed something in a university lab, uh, and we took that concept and developed it into something that could be injected into humans, right? So imagine a university lab, it's dirty, it's scummy, and like people are drinking their coffee, and it's all grad students, and they come up with this cool thing, this process. We would take that rough process and we'd commercialize it, right? And so we were very much doing something that had never been done on Earth before, right? Like manufacturing this at a large scale under these types of restrictions. Now, The thing with industry is that it's all about money and it's all about timing. So the way that these contracts would work is like, okay, we're going to pay you a big whack of money. You're going to develop this product and it's going to be ready on this date. And we're like, we've never done like this has never been done by any human being before. We need to develop it out. So we'd often say, well, we want to do a number of development runs. And they're like, that's going to cost money and we're not going to be able to use the product. And we're like, exactly. And they're like, we don't want any development runs. We want you to do it right the first time. And, there'd be that negotiation. So like we'd always do a development run. We'd get that in there, but never as much as you need. Because you do it the first time and you figure out what doesn't work wrong. And now it's like, okay, now you got to go live. And if you miss this due date, the way these contracts are set up, or at least the way set up is like, all right, it's due on this date. Every day you're late, your company will pay us a penalty of like 5 grand per day or something like that, right? And this is 1990 money, like 5 grand per day in 1990 money, right? So you have these like crushing timelines that are like not movable. And you're doing something that's never been done before. You got to do it right the first time. You're kind of, and it's as I say, it's an adrenaline rush. It was an adrenaline rush. Oh, some late nights and long weekends to make that happen. So that was one of the pain points for that particular job. Another particular pain point, and that probably explains my transition out of it, is that where I work, I'm in Vancouver, BC, and all of our biotech companies here at that time, like they're very early stage, they're small stage, they're like stage one, two, they're in the clinical development process, right? And the clinical development process has a horrendous failure rate. Like the stats are like 80% of products that enter phase one clinical trials will fail before they get to phase three clinical trials. And they'll cost a gazillion dollars to do that. And so all of these startup companies, they're startup companies that live off of investor money. They're in stage one, stage two, whatever. 80% probability that the product's going to fail. So you got 10 companies, 8 out of 10 of them are probably going to fail, which means they're probably going to go out of business. And so there's a lot of volatility. You sort of, I kind of felt like, my career in biotech felt like I was kind of hopping from sinking ship to sinking ship and just trying to stay one step away from getting my toes in the water. And so that's another pain, especially if you're working with early stage biotech. Like if you get with a big company like Pharmacia or Merck and stuff like that, probably a little bit more stability. But if you're working in those early stages, they're a lot of fun and you work with some really cool things, but a lot of turnover and a lot of pressure, a lot of turnover. Um, and so that was fun when I was in my 20s. When I was in my 20s, I like, this is a blast. I'm having a great time. Then, you get in your 30s and you get a crushing mortgage and you're like, is this what I should be doing? Is this still fun? Start to, that's kind of, let's say those pain points started to add up for me there, which explains why I eventually transitioned out of it. So
Let's talk about the education required to
yeah,
get into biotech. Do you
yeah,
need just a bachelor's?
yeah,
Obviously, this may have changed,
yeah.
but do you need a bachelor's degree? Do you need a master's? Do you need a
Yeah.
PhD? What does that typically look like from your perspective?
There's a role for any of them, and it depends what you want. If you have a bachelor's degree, you're probably going to start off as a lab tech. You're probably going to start off as a lab technician, which is kind of you do all the grunt work, right? When I said, oh, you throw it to the grad student to do that's kind of the lab techs have a very standardized job. It's the same kind of stuff every day. And so on. And if you work with a biotech company, you could probably work your way up the ladder, but you'd probably start there. If you have a graduate degree, if you had a master's degree, you'd probably be able to start a little bit above just an entry level lab technician. I was able to sort of get into project supervision, project management, and stuff like that, which is a lot of fun. You're probably a lot more involved with more of the R&D side of things. Lab technicians, they just sort of they just follow the instructions. If you got the master's degree, you can probably be a little bit more involved in terms of like developing out research programs, doing pure research. And then, of course, the height there is a PhD. PhD absolutely has a role in biotech. I feel like most people could get away with a master's degree. Like I think there's a lot of PhDs, and there's probably too many PhDs, more PhDs than the world needs. I kind of feel the sweet spot in industry, like a master's degree will give you a good career. There's some doors that will be closed, like especially Companies, when they're looking for investor financing, like to have somebody with a doctor in front of their name and PhD after it because that gives them the credibility. So you won't be able to fill that role with a master's, but I kind of feel like master's is a nice sweet spot. You get to do some interesting, cool things without having to spend the, gazillion years in university and stuff like that. There's a role for all of those things, so it just depends what you want. But as I said, for me, my feeling, master's was a sweet spot for me, at least for those reasons.
That's awesome. That's good to know. So if someone's really passionate, they want to, get their bachelor and then get right to work, they can do that, go back at their
Yep,
master's, continue climbing, or if they want to keep going, education, and then jump into it, that's an option too. Love to
totally.
hear that there's some flexibility with that. So you said, you were having a blast, you were doing
Yep,
biotech for 10, 15, whatever, however many years it was,
yep, yep.
decided to get out. So what was your next stop along the line?
Yeah. So it was a little bit serendipity. Partway through my experience, my life in biotech, I went and I got my MBA, and I did my MBA part-time, so I was working while getting my MBA. Especially because I was working in industry. The language of the side and the language of the science side, they speak different languages. They don't speak with each other. So a good career move in biotech is to get your science qualifications and then go back and get your MBA. So that's what I did. And I really loved getting my MBA. I actually really loved business. I actually felt more passion for it than I ever did for the science. I was like surprised at that. So I originally did it to improve myself in the biotech field, fell in love with business, and I started to shift my career more to business development, the business, aspect of things, management and business development. Got laid off in 2008 with the big financial crash. And as I say, I was like hopping from ship to ship and like, oh, too slow. Um, so that happened to me. And that's kind of, as I say, I was in my 30s and I had crushing mortgage. And I was like, is this as fun as it was when I was in my 20s? And just, it was just me, me in a suitcase. And so I decided, like my MBA at that time was still fresh, and I decided, like, yeah, this, like, I don't want to, I like something different, right? And so I started to shift out of that, did a little bit of soul searching. Long story short, I ended up in university education, and I'm now a professor of business, or like I'm a university prof in business. I'm the chair of the entrepreneurial leadership department at our university, which is insane. Like people that knew me when I was 20 and in university and in the sciences, they're like, "You teach business now? Like, how did that happen? That's totally unrelated." I'm like, "It is totally unrelated, but that's where I am now, and I love it. I love it. I've been doing. Um, Probably about 15 years or so, and best job I've ever had. So there you
So
go.
I've talked to a number of professors at private institutions, public institutions.
Yeah.
You're kind of unique because I believe you said you have a master's in your science field as well as the
Yeah.
MBA.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep. Oh yeah.
so
Yeah. And then I also got a doctorate in business administration recently as well. But it was my MBA that got me into my teaching gig. So yeah.
awesome, awesome. Well, congrats on the recent acquisition of your
Yeah.
latest degree.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
with having a master's in a science field and your MBA as well, do you at your institution do you have the flexibility to teach science and business, or no, you have to kind of pick one or the other? What's that like?
You kind of got to pick one. You kind of got to pick one or the other. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I kind of feel like even at this point, I feel like if I went to the science department, I'm like, hey, I'd like to teach, they'd probably be like, I'm probably too out of date. They wouldn't be interested in me. I've never tried. But yeah, you kind of got to pick. You kind of got to pick.
You're teaching at the university, you're teaching
Yeah.
business courses. You're also an author, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I write sci-fi. So yeah, I write sci for fun. I've also written some non-fiction to support some of my work at the university. When I say I'm a writer, I'm usually thinking the sci-fi aspect that I do. Yeah.
So now I remember when I was in college many years ago. A handful of my professors, actually, I think just one, maybe two, they authored their own textbook. And when I say textbook, it was more of like a spiral
Yep.
bound book that we had to purchase.
Yeah.
Do you have the opportunity to do that for your own classes? Is that not really done anymore? Is it all electronic now? What's that like?
Yeah, no, that's a lovely question. It is still done. Now I have like our university is very much emphasizes open access resources, and I'm very much a follower of that as well, right? Like I think knowledge should be free. Like a lot of profs, like that's the stereotype. Like the prof writes their own textbook, then they makes it a required textbook for the course, and they make a gazillion dollars. And like I know, I feel that that's exploitative. I've written two nonfiction there, and they're related. One is worth money, but it's written more for PhDs and researchers. And then I took that work and I wrote it for lay people for like a targeted for a second year university course. And that one I've made open access, so it's like free. And it is required. It is required for the course, but it's free and it is online. I'd say overall, the big door-stopping textbooks are kind of a thing of the past now. It's an anachronism. It's all pretty much digital and online. You want me to start? If you're on, if you want to see a rant, you can get me ranting about the textbook industry and some of their practices. But yeah, it's pretty much all. Long story short, no rant. It's all online now. There you go.
You started writing science fiction. I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
assuming it kind of found its way to you through your science background. Is that a fair
Yes.
assessment?
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, growing up, I was always really interested in science. I was interested in a lot of things, but yeah, I was kind of always drawn to science and science fiction and that aspect. So yeah, yeah,
Now, one question I like to ask to any of my authors that I'm speaking with, it's like,
yeah.
how did you start writing the book? And when I say that, it's like, did you to commit to it, like I am going to write a book, or is it something that you were just kind of like doing in your spare time, and then before you know, like, you know what, I'm just going to keep going with this and see if I can sell this. How did that work out for you?
Something I have discovered over the years is that if you want to actually write a book, you can't just be like, you can't just be haphazard about it. Like you gotta buckle down and make it happen. And I write slowly. So you said write in your spare time. And that being said, I still do only write in my spare time. Like I, write in the evenings and stuff like that. But you gotta buckle down and make it happen. So originally, yeah. I wrote a trilogy originally, and I self-published that. I say that those are like my practice novels because they're my first things that I actually finished, and I now know so much more about what I should have done when I wrote them. But I wrote those three, and just yeah, committed to writing them, got them done. And then through that experience self-publishing, I realized very quickly, like, well, if you self-publish, like basically, if you want to sell books, you got to become a marketer, and then like you're a full-time marketer and you write on the side and stuff like that. And it's my hobby. So if I'm going to, if I have spare time, I'm going to spend it writing, not marketing. And so I'm like, okay, I think I'm actually good at this. I got some good feedback. So I'm like, okay, the next book I write, I'm going to see if I can actually get it officially published. And it took a lot of doing, but I did. I got my first book published back in 2019. Was when it was first picked up. That book is called Duatero. Just I guess a little plug for that. And then yeah, started to write. Yep, started to work on a second book, one of that as well. One of the things I find like getting a book published is hard. I don't. Maybe it's just me, and maybe all your authors are like, "Oh, it's so easy." Getting a book published is hard. Like you gotta have some tenacity. You gotta have some tenacity and some thick skin.
So, well, one thing I want to ask, and I didn't ask anyone else this before. So, your first trilogy,
Okay.
it was self-published.
Yeah.
Did that help you at all get to the next level and actually go through a publisher, or did that not have any effect?
It did not help me get published. Like a publisher isn't going to say like, "Oh, you're self-published. You're so valuable." They'll be like, "Oh, you're self-published. That means nothing." Because if you pay the bill, you can get it published, right? But what it did teach me is it was useful. It was useful because it did teach me the process of writing a book, and it did teach me the process of getting the book published, like knowing what's involved with the publishing process. Whether you self-publish or you publish with a publisher, there's a publishing process, and that process is what the process is. So doing it myself did give me like I knew it was going to happen. I knew it was going to happen. Um, Nothing was a surprise. It just sort of helped that process. Like I didn't feel like a new like what's going on? What do I do next? Like I didn't feel like didn't feel like I was embarrassing myself. I felt like I knew what I was doing when I started to go through that process.
All right, that's
So
good information. Very, very good information. Now,
yeah,
Brad, I am running a little short on time, but one thing I like to do whenever I'm speaking with someone is give them the opportunity to talk about a project they're working on, a cause they believe in. If you want to talk more about your books or something else, I'll leave it open to you. The floor is yours.
my publisher would never forgive me if I did not take this opportunity to mention that, hey, I have a new science fiction book coming out. It's coming out at the end of this year. It might, by the time this airs, it might already be out. It's called Ashme's Song. It's another science fiction. It's a gritty look at flawed characters dealing with a very complicated situation and trying to figure their way out of it. So if you like, stories with, sort of complex, flawed characters trying to work their way out of a very complex situation, I'm the writer for you. Ashme Song, yeah, should be
That
available wherever you buy books online. Should be available.
that is awesome. I'll make sure I get all of the appropriate links from you so that when people are trying to find it, they can easily find you. I'll put them in the description. I'll put them in the show notes, my website, all over the place so like that people can find you. Brad, it's been absolutely awesome speaking with you on Time We Discuss. We learned about biotech and you as a science fiction author.
Very cool. Thank you very much for your time. Enjoyed talking with you.